March 1944. Rechlin Airfield, Mecklenburg, Germany. Inside the dimly lit hangars of the Luftwaffe's secret testing grounds, a group of engineers, mechanics, and officers gathered around what appeared to be a captured miracle. Before them rested a largely intact American fighter, a P-51 Mustang, salvaged from a crash near Brandenburg after one of the first long-range escort missions to Berlin. The men could scarcely believe it. Until now, their understanding of aerial warfare was governed by mathematics. A single-engine fighter could not possibly escort bombers to Berlin, nearly 600 miles from Allied bases in England, and return home. The range required was far beyond any known design. Yet this Mustang, and the hundreds like it seen that week, had proven otherwise. The discovery set off alarm bells at the highest levels of the German Air Ministry. General Adolf Galland, the Luftwaffe's most respected ace, had already witnessed these long-range escorts during recent dogfights above the capital. His warning to Berlin was blunt. The Americans have solved the range problem. The bomber streams are no longer vulnerable. To many within the Luftwaffe command, that single sentence marked the beginning of the end. But what exactly made this aircraft so formidable? At Rechlin, the answer would soon emerge, piece by piece. Engineers began the disassembly with surgical precision. The Merlin engine, a license-built Rolls-Royce design manufactured by Packard in Detroit, astonished the German evaluators. Every component bore the stamp of mass production. Tight tolerances, interchangeable fittings, and immaculate machining, all achieved not by handcraft, but by industrial systems. But what truly puzzled them was the aircraft's endurance. Even with the efficient Merlin, the internal tanks of the Mustang provided just over 1,000 miles of range, barely enough to reach Berlin and return, let alone engage in 20 minutes of air combat. Yet the wreckage from recent engagements proved otherwise. Dozens of P-51s had fought deep inside Germany and still made it back to England. Somewhere, there was a secret. That secret was uncovered days later when a Luftwaffe recovery team retrieved two strange cylindrical containers from a wooded field east of Berlin. The objects looked like fuel tanks, but the material was unlike anything they had seen. Light, almost flimsy, and clearly not metallic. At Rechlin, chemical analysis revealed the unbelievable truth. They were made of laminated paper and resin. Paper, the same material used for packing crates and industrial tubes, had been transformed into a disposable, fuel-tight vessel. Each tank could hold 108 U.S. gallons, or roughly 400 liters, giving the Mustang nearly double its range. Combined with the internal tanks, the P-51 could now travel almost 2,000 miles, more than enough for round-trip escort missions to Berlin, Leipzig, and beyond. To the German engineers, the implications were staggering. These weren't desperate improvisations. They were genius. Metal was precious, welders were scarce, and every factory hour was vital. Yet the Americans had turned to paper, allowing packaging companies and paper mills to produce thousands of fuel tanks per month. They could be made anywhere, by unskilled labor, on civilian equipment, and shipped flat for assembly. Once filled with aviation fuel, they were sealed, flown, and dropped after use. They dissolved slightly if exposed to fuel for too long, but that didn't matter. They only needed to last a few hours. The Allied air armada had, in essence, weaponized disposability. For the Luftwaffe, the realization was devastating. It wasn't that the P-51 itself was vastly superior to the Bf-109 or FW-190. It was that the entire Allied system had evolved beyond Germany's ability to compete. While the Reich meticulously handcrafted fighters, the United States produced them on assembly lines so efficient that a new Mustang rolled off the line every 2 hours. The Americans were not just building machines, They were building momentum. By April 1944, the effect was already visible. The once invincible daylight defenses of the Reich began to crumble. Squadrons of Mustangs now escorted bombers from takeoff to target, cutting through German interceptors and decimating the Jagdgeschwader. Luftwaffe losses skyrocketed. 355 fighters destroyed in February, 491 in March, over 600 in April. The attrition was catastrophic. For every German pilot lost, the Americans replaced 5. For every factory bombed, another was built overseas. At Rechlin, the engineers compiled a technical report for the Air Ministry, a chilling 60-page document summarizing what they had found. It concluded that the Allies had achieved an industrial solution to a military problem. The paper, tanks, though trivial in appearance, symbolized an entirely new form of warfare, one where logistics, not invention, determined victory. Galland himself later admitted that after March 1944, the Luftwaffe was no longer the hunter. It had become the hunted. By midsummer, entire German cities witnessed the strange sight of thousands of drop tanks falling from the sky. Pale brown, cylinders tumbling through clouds after being jettisoned by Allied fighters. Many civilians mistook them for bombs or new secret weapons. Children collected fragments as souvenirs. Farmers found them embedded in their fields. To those who understood their purpose, however, they represented something darker. Proof that the war was lost in the factories, not the skies. As 1944 turned to 1945, the Luftwaffe's nightmare became total. P-51s roamed over Germany with impunity, strafing airfields, fuel convoys, and rail yards. Pilots had to ration training flights. Fuel stocks were so depleted that even experienced aces were grounded. Meanwhile, the Allies had achieved near-total air dominance. Rechlin continued to function until the final months of the war, testing what remained of Germany's technological hopes: jet fighters, rockets, and miracle weapons. But everyone there knew the truth. No amount of innovation could overcome the logistical machine that the Allies had built. When Germany surrendered in May 1945, Allied investigators visited Rechlin and discovered that many of the engineers had carefully preserved the captured Mustang and the remnants of its paper tanks. They were studied one last time, not as enemy artifacts, but as symbols of an era. One German engineer wrote in his post-war memoir, "We admired it not for its speed or its guns, but for its simplicity. It was the proof that victory could be mass-produced." In the decades that followed, fragments of those original paper tanks found their way into aviation museums. Their yellowed surfaces, still faintly smelling of fuel and resin, remain silent witnesses to the war's industrial revolution. To visitors, they look almost comical, disposable, fragile, absurd. Yet those very tanks reshaped the air war over Europe. They turned the Mustang into the longest-ranged fighter in history at that time, and rendered Germany's defenses obsolete. When Luftwaffe veterans were later asked when they first realized Germany could not win, their answers were hauntingly consistent. Not Stalingrad, not Normandy, not the Ardennes, but the day the Mustangs reached Berlin. That was the moment they knew the sky and the future no longer belonged to them.